So it's without further ado, I introduce this fabulous, fabulous woman. I met Libby a couple of months ago. I had Googled some of the top leadership and top speakers, really nationally, and Libby's name came up. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to introduce myself to her and see if she bites. And she actually did bite. And we ended up I ended up actually hiring Libby to help me out with a new book and some other efforts I have going on. But Libby is an amazing, amazing lady, and I'm just so happy to call her my friend as well. She's an executive coach, a leadership expert, and she's an award-winning author. And she has many famous clients, including Bank of America, Disney, Intel, Microsoft. And the fun part about Livy, and I love sharing this part of her story, is that she began her career as a talking Christmas tree at a local mall. Then she moved on to be a tap dancing bear at Knott's Berry Farm, and then a hand model for Fancy Feast cat food. So she got her humble beginnings, and she moved ahead to heading communications for Sony, Universal, and Turner. It's without further ado that I want to introduce my friend and stop sharing so you can see her face, Libby Gill.
Thank you so much, Peggy. I appreciate that lovely intro, and I am happy to help you go a mile a minute, as you always do, with all the projects that you have. So first, I want to just ask you all, if you could cultivate this one trait, I'm wondering if you would be interested in cultivating a trait that would help you meet your goals more consistently, lead more effectively, and navigate more change more easily. You might be interested in that, right? And this trait is what propelled Helen Keller, having an abundance of this one trait, to become the first deafblind person ever to graduate from college in the United States. Now, she wanted to go to Harvard, but they wouldn't take her, of course, because she was a woman. So she went to Radcliffe, which is now a part of Harvard. This trait is also what motivated Austrian psychiatrist Dr. Viktor Frankl to survive not one, but two notorious Nazi death camps, Auschwitz and Dachau. And then to go on and write this groundbreaking book about finding purpose within the walls of those concentration camps, called Man's Search for Meaning. This trait is what saved 12 young soccer players and their coach in that cave in northern Thailand, even as it was beginning to flood. And that trait, which I believe is one of the most life-changing but also overlooked tools that we have, is hope. And by the way, the head of the Thai Navy SEALs who led that rescue said that all he had to work with was hope. And a BBC reporter who covered that story said he thought it was a great example of hope in action. So I'm here to talk to you about the power of hope today. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, hope? This is the worst year I've ever had. This is a terrible year for my family and my friends and my business. And I get it. I truly do. I know we have this heightened sense of vulnerability. We've lost control over the simplest things in our daily lives. And we've got this feeling of uncertainty that seems like it's never going to end. And some of you may already be the ones who say, hope is not a strategy or hope is not a plan. But I'm here to convince you that when you can put hope into action, you can change your life. And this is not just my opinion, by the way. There was a great study done of 10,000 people across the United States who were asked by the study authors to name the leader who most directly impacted their lives, and then to name what that person brought to them. And so the study authors took all of the words and put all of these traits together and found that 4 came up consistently. One was trust, right? Foundational. If you don't have trust, pack up and go home, right? Second was stability, which I think even in times of change, especially in times of change like we're in right now, You got to be the rock for other people. Third was compassion, which I think we've seen more of with people right now, willing to help their neighbors, do some grocery shopping, leading and reaching out to people with compassion. And I pray that that sticks with us. And then finally, they said hope. People want hope. They want to believe that their future is going to be better than their present, right? So I want to talk today a little bit about hope theory, which is the science of hopefulness, the pioneers of that science, and also a process so that you can put hope into action in your own life, to take it out of the abstract, make it concrete and actionable. So I want to start first with the idea that hope, well, first hope comes from Old English, the word hope, and the root word is hopian, which means to leap forward with expectation. I think that feels pretty good, to leap forward with expectation. It's not walking or strolling, it is leaping. And the pioneers of this theory, and it's one that is not so well known by people. We're more familiar with the happiness research, but there's this body of research around hopefulness that comes from positive psychology and medicine. And the first pioneer of this study of hope theory was a fellow named Dr. Rick Snyder, and he was a professor of positive psychology at the University of Kansas. And Dr. Snyder decided when he was on sabbatical, he was going to go to the university library and check out all the research on hope, only to discover there was none. Of course, there was fiction and poetry and scripture and all kinds of things about hope, but there was no data, there was no research, there were no academic treatises on the topic. So he realized that academics had thought it was too intangible, that it was too squishy to measure. So like any good social scientist, he created an assessment called the Adult Dispositional Hope Scale. I just call it the Hope Quiz, and I'm going to share it with you at the end of this presentation. I've got a giveaway. It's 12 questions, so you can see how hopeful you are and how much agency you have in fashioning the future. Now, Dr. Snyder said a couple of really interesting things about hope. He said, first of all, it was putting hope into action was based on having willpower, which he described sort of like we think of it, mental fortitude, grit, perseverance, but it also was dependent on what he called way power. And I found this really interesting, particularly for people in business. And what he meant by that was there was always another way to reach an end goal. There were multiple pathways to an outcome. So anytime a door slams in your face, anytime you get a no from someone, there's another way to approach it. And for leaders, I think that's really important to begin to push things down to your junior folks and let them find their pathways to the end goal. Then there's another fellow named Dr. Jerome Groopman. Dr. Groopman was a Harvard-trained oncologist, and he wrote a fascinating little book called The Anatomy of Hope, totally for the layperson, highly readable. And Dr. Groopman said that hope was comprised of two key components. He said, first, it was a belief that change was possible, right? Fundamental belief that change is possible. If you don't have that, you might be one of those defenders of the status quo, it is what it is, you can't fight City Hall, but he believed that change was possible. And secondly, that it was your actions, your expectation that your actions as an individual drove the outcome. So it was what you do, not what your spouse or boss or government or any of that did. It's a belief that change is possible and an expectation that you drive the future. Now, when Dr. Groopman was a young clinician, cancer doctor, and he was giving diagnoses to his patients, he felt that it was his duty to give them all the information he had at his disposal, which, as you can imagine, was a lot. And what he found was that his patients were shutting down in overwhelm. It was too much. And they sort of checked out of their own healing process. They weren't able to participate. There was too much fear and doubt. So he did as we often do in business or in life. He overcorrected and went all the way to the other end of the spectrum and began giving just as little information as he possibly could to his patients. And then he found he was creating this sense of false security. Everything's going to be okay, not a big deal, which he said created false hope. So he decided his job was to find that sweet spot right in the middle, that delicate balance where people could see the future, believe that change and a positive outcome was possible, but recognize that there would always be setbacks and challenges. And then as he began to conduct research along his career, he found that the people that were more hopeful about a life-threatening illness, about a cancer diagnosis, those who were more hopeful not only participated in their treatment more aggressively, but also that their brains released chemicals, endorphins and enkephalins, which suppressed pain and boosted the immune system. So he found a physiological connection among people who believed that change was possible and that they had agency in the outcome, were more likely to get through that treatment process more with less pain and with a better prognosis. I found that to be so fascinating, that hope was no longer abstract, but something measurable, concrete, and that affected our own brain chemistry. And now I'd like to tell you a little bit about how having hope and sometimes the lack of hope played out in my own early career. You heard my wacky jobs before I got into the real side of entertainment, when I finally figured out this is not sustainable. I can't be a hand model or a tap dancing bear for the rest of my career. And I moved to the other side of the camera. And I was fortunate to get a job with a company called Embassy Communications that had been founded by a real mogul, a real legend in the television business named Norman Lear. You have to be my age to remember all those great sitcoms of the 70s and 80s, All in the Family. Peggy says yes. All in the Family and the Jeffersons and Maude. And they were really forward thinking for their time. They made a huge impact on entertainment. And I got a job in the PR department. And I was so excited. You know, I have a real job. I've got a parking space. I've got insurance. And it was this mid-sized production and distribution company. And I thought, wow, I'm going to get to meet everybody. I'm going to get to know everybody. I'm going to learn everything there is about television. And very quickly, that company was bought by Columbia Pictures, which was bought by Coca-Cola, which was bought by Sony. And I saw in those few years that I really had two choices. And even as a young executive in training, I saw I could either dive under my desk and just kind of wait it out and see what happens, or I could raise my hand. And I decided that was a better choice. I'd raise my hand and figure it out. And I'd raise my hand and raise my hand. And in 5 years, I went from being an assistant in the PR department of that small company to the head of publicity, advertising, and promotion for Sony's worldwide television group. So that seeing the future and knowing that I had some impact and agency served me really well. But there's one thing I didn't mention about that job. And that was the day that I was to begin my first real corporate entertainment job. I got a call in the early morning from my dad. And my stepmother, Fran, who I had spent half my life with, had committed suicide. Now, I'd have my share of tragedies like many of you had. I lost my oldest brother, the oldest of us 6, on Christmas Day when I was 10 years old. My parents had gone through a very public and very messy divorce, after which my father, a psychiatrist, married his own psychiatric patient, Fran, my stepmother. So it was a strange upbringing. And at this point, my dad had disowned my other 4 siblings, so it was up to me to fly back home to Florida. So I called my new boss and said, I'll have to start in a week. I didn't give him any details, but told him there was a death in the family, was called back home, and I went home to Florida to plan a funeral, to pack up clothes, same thing many of you have done. And I gave my stepmother, Fran's, beautiful things to the housekeeper and Goodwill and some of her friends, except for the one thing my father just could not bear to give to anyone except to me. And that was my stepmother, Fran's, full-length mink coat with their little matching hood, which I took back to my tiny apartment in Hollywood, never needing anything like that, and stuck it back in the closet, and finally went back to work at this job. I started this job and I worked and I worked and I worked out of grief and loneliness and despair. And I just put my head down and plowed through. until one day I came home and I just thought, I just looking for some sort of distraction. And it occurred to me, I had never even tried on that mink coat. I'd never tried on any kind of fur ever in my life, let alone owned one, but there it was in the back of my closet. So I went into my bedroom and I unzipped that garment bag and I put that coat on. And it was so heavy and luxurious and decadent. And all I could think was, I wonder how many dead animals it took to make this one coat for my poor, sad stepmother. And that thought just slayed me. And I just went right down to the floor on my knees, wrapped in my mink coat, and I crawled like a little wounded animal into my hallway of my apartment. And I stayed there wrapped in this mink coat for an entire weekend, crying. And when I finally cried out so much pain and despair, and it occurred to me that, I've got two ways to go here. I can stay down here on the floor and be miserable, or I can get up and do something with my life. And it was one of those moments of universal inspiration that the minute I thought that, I swear to you, I felt sleeves coming, I felt arms coming through the sleeves of that mink coat, just picking me up off the floor. And I heard this voice in my head that said, get up, girl. You got hope and tools to share. And I thought, first of all, am I crazy? What was that? And then that little phrase, hope and tools, just sort of rattled around in my brain for about a decade before I started writing about hope and the power of hope, which to me was what gets you out of bed in the morning, even on the worst of days. And later as an executive coach, I really discovered the science of hopefulness. And it was so powerful to me. I thought, wait a minute, this hope and tools, as I began to flesh that out, having a sense of you can make every day better. You can drive the outcome if you believe that change is possible and you have the courage and conviction to do something, anything, to move towards a better future. And then having the resources and finding the tools so that you could continue on that path. And I thought, that's kind of my superpower. I really realized that this is my superpower, this combination of hope and change, being able to see a better future, and then to move and persevere past it. And the truth is, we've all got a superpower. All of you here today, we've all got some innate gift. I think we all know what Peggy's is, or many of them. Boy, does she move and change and take people with her. That's just one of your gifts, but that I think is your superpower, Peggy. But we've all got something that really drives us, and it's what inspires other people, and it's what motivates us to change. And I just want to invite you right now to think about your superpower. And you may never have even said it out loud. You may never have put your superpower into words. It's what makes you great at what you are. And what I want to do right now is we're going to send you all to some breakout rooms. We'll go about 5 or 6 minutes, I think, and we're going to send you some breakouts so you can identify your superpower, share it with others. It's time to name it and claim it. And then maybe you want to share an action. How does that influence what you do in the world every day? How does your superpower come into play? All right, are we ready there to send everybody? We're just going randomly, and then we'll do a few report outs when we come back. Okay, Linda says we're good to go. Ready, set, break out. So one thing that was interesting in my room is that there were so many different things. And I think as women, we sometimes undervalue what's really great about us because we assume, I'm good at this. Probably everybody is. Not that big a deal. But in fact, I could talk to a room of 1,000 people and ask you all the same question, and there will be no overlap because we are such unique human beings with what we do. But right now, I'd love to hear from a couple of what some of your superpowers came up in your groups. And Linda, I don't know how best we do this, but raise a hands or a shout out or whatever you think.
So I'm not on mute anymore. I think if anybody wants to just go ahead and share, just take yourself off mute and go ahead and share.
And you can share yours, or if you had somebody in your group that just had a really cool superpower and you want to share theirs, that's fine too.
Well, I just want to say I'm getting a real kick out of watching Renee Martinez's dogs walk and the back end view. That made my friggin' day. They are so friggin' cute. So pardon me. I was going to use the word ass, but but anyways, that was off topic. So Adrian, what do you think? You're on mute.
Yes, I just said, oh my gosh. What was my superpower? Looking at the big picture and identifying opportunities and pathways of getting there.
Nice.
And encouraging and motivating others, you said too, Adrian. I wrote that down.
Ah,
I know Sheila has an amazing story, and just as she's getting to walk away from the camera,
there
I'm
she
sorry.
is.
Yeah, no, there she is again. But Sheila, you should share your story and the positivity you had, because your story is heartbreaking and wonderful, all in one perfect little package.
Yeah, well, as far as my superpower, I had shared that mine is my relentless drive. So I was saying in my job, I do PHP coding and JavaScript. I kind of self-taught it and just learned how to do it. And I always have to find a way to like get it done. It's very rare that I tell somebody no. I'll just work until it's finished. But as far as you know, my story, I was diagnosed with breast cancer actually about a year ago and went through chemo and multiple surgeries during a pandemic, and you know, couldn't see my family. My family's all out in California, but it's just been, you know, I'm so grateful for everything that I've been through and for, you know, the experiences that I've had. I totally just recognize that, you know, the hope, how important that is. I was asking questions. I wanted to know what was going to happen, what to expect, but I was hopeful the whole time. And it was not a bad experience. I got through it and here I am.
There you are. Thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful. Way to go, Sheila. So I found with my superpower, once I really got, oh, okay, I'm pretty good at mapping a plan to the future, and I'm pretty tenacious about getting there. And when I went on in my career after those first rounds of jobs, and I ended up, I was recruited by Universal to go there. And it was a really strange time in the history of that studio, which had had the most stable management for many years. It was the most stable studio and also the most stagnant. And then right before I joined it, it had been bought by Seagram's, the spirits company, the alcohol company, which made no sense. And in hindsight, made no sense and was a massive business failure, but we didn't know that at the time. I came in with the new chairman of television, and my job was to communicate. I was the head of communications. We were building a new profile for the studio. We were back, we were strong, we were creative, all of that. And I got there and I discovered there had been so much change. Every business unit head had changed across the studio in less than 18 months. I mean, they had a motion pictures and television, music and consumer products, all new. So for a studio that had had no change for 40 years, people were scared to death. They just kind of put their heads down and protected their turf. And here I was trying to build this profile, and nobody had any interest in meeting with me. And I thought, well, you know, if I'm head of communications, I better get out there and communicate. So I set up 15-minute meetings with anybody that had anything to do with the television side of the company and would agree to meet with me. And my calendar was just filled with these little tiny meetings. And I, of course, offered to go to them. So Universal Studios, if you've ever seen the Hollywood one, it's a big place. It's 540 acres of back lot. And so I got in my trusty golf cart and I drove out past the Western Town and the Parting of the Red Seas and the Jurassic Park building. And I met with producers and on-air talent, the guys in the wood mill, costume designers, finance people, HR folks, anybody that would spend 15 minutes with me face-to-face, I met. And pretty soon, the walls started to come down a little bit. And I heard over and over again, you're the first person from corporate who's ever been out here. And obviously corporate was a bad word, But once they got to know us, and the fact that I was just there to find out, what do you need and how can we help? We're here to build a profile for the studio and you're part of it. And pretty soon people began to trust us because they began to see their way to the future. Some of the fears began to dissipate. And then my team, we were the promotions and publicity folks. Anything we ask for, hey, here's these big flat sound stages. We want to paint a giant logo on the top of one so that the news choppers pick it up as they go past and we're promoting a show, or we want to hang a banner from the top of Jurassic Park. Would you please call the architect and ask him how we can do this? And they all said yes. And so all of these things began to happen because people saw that they were part of something. They belonged to something and they saw a better future. And so now I want to share with you the process that I use, because I work across multiple industries, but it's always people in performance. So what I do is this 4-step process, and I want to share this with you. And I'd like you to kind of think along, like I'm sitting here coaching you one-on-one, and we're talking about these 4 steps. So if you want to jot anything down, please do. I'm going to give you a little homework assignment at the end. I'll warn you now. So the first step, and I call this the true hope process in honor of Dr. Groupman's false hope and true hope. Not going to be easy to get there if you set the bar high enough, but if you're realistic, I call it the attainable but ambitious goal. So the first step is to clarify your vision. And I know we all think we've done that, or we think we do that regularly, but what do you want to get to by the end of the year? You can frame it however you want. I tend to think in 1 year to 18-month increments. But if I said, what's your one overarching goal you want to get to by the end of the year? And I'm going to give you a reminder of this process too, so you've got it. So just jot down some thoughts for you. Clarify that vision. And is it measurable? Can you get there? Is it within your control? That's the first step. Second step is to simplify the pathway. Don't we as humans, and particularly as women, sometimes make things as difficult as we possibly can? I know I do. If there's a hard way to do something, that's the one I figure out. Same thing with the grocery checker line. I will always find the one that's the longest. It's a knack I have. But if you can simplify that pathway by moving things out of the way, by blasting through barriers, by asking for help and support, how do you make that A to Z as straight a line as possible? And if you detour knowingly and for a good reason, but you see that end goal and you know how to make it simpler to get there. And the third step is then to execute. It's to get out there and do it, not just to think about it or not just to take another class or course. Nothing against that. I'm a lifelong learner like you all are, but there's a point where you have to put it into action. So take that plan, take that big vision, translate that into action. I work by 1 year goal, quarterly goals, monthly goals, weekly goals, daily goals. It's as simple and as complicated as that. You execute that plan, you bring in people to help you, you get feedback along the way. And finally, and this is a step a lot of people forget, the 4th step is to review, reflect, and refine, because typically we're on to the next thing. We complete one thing and we move right on. So anything as small as a call or a meeting or one project, a daily task. How did I do? What worked and what didn't work? All the way up to a huge launch or rollout or a giant project. Build it into your calendar. It's that last step of what worked, what feedback do I need? How do I refine that and course correct for the future so that you are incrementally growing and changing, evolving along the way? In the auto industry, they call it Kaizen. People industry, it's ongoing improvement, but it is that taking a look back so you can go forward. All right, now I'm going to give you all a reminder of this. I've got a giveaway for you at the end here. And I want to share this one final story with you. I mentioned my family was fairly chaotic and lots of things happened when I was a kid. And it required that I go to 6 different high schools before I went to college and said, that's it, I'm staying here. When my family went back to Florida, it was like, LA is now home. I am not budging again. So one of my high schools happened to be in Japan, and where I became interested in sort of Eastern philosophy and ways of doing business. It was fascinating to me. And one of the things I discovered was this little folk toy called a Daruma. And this is my Daruma. Daruma he is the god of perseverance. He's a symbol of continuity and improvement. And when you get your Daruma, and you would buy this at a Buddhist temple, often on New Year's Day, or to give to somebody who's starting on a new life path, a job or a baby or marriage. And when you get Daruma, his big eyes are blank. There we go. His eyes are blank, and you set an intention and you color in one eye. And when I was 15 and got my Daruma, I set my 15-year-old intention, which was to have a good job, a pretty house, and a happy family. Pretty good for a 15-year-old. And I just hung on to this little guy. He has traveled the world with me. And in fact, when I go out in the world and speak, he just sits there on the lectern. Sometimes people notice him, sometimes they don't. He just reminds me to continue setting higher goals. And when I hit 40, I thought, you know what? I think I've kind of hit that. I've kind of done it. I've got a good job and a happy family and a nice house. I'm just going to color in that eye. And I started to color in that eye, and I stopped. Something stopped me. And I thought, you know what? I don't think I'll ever get there. It's always going to be that process of evolution and setting the bar higher and moving forward. So he is just one of those visual reminders for me to persevere, to continue, to engage, to set the bar higher. I think that's why all of you are here at She Can, because there's so much more you want to do, and you recognize that here's a community of people here who are here to help and serve you. So in the spirit of the Daruma, I want to give you a little homework assignment so you can take some action, so you can take these ideas, put them into practice. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of a trusted friend, could be somebody in this group, could be somebody outside, who will have an honest conversation. It's only going to require about 10 minutes of their time with you. And I want you to jot that person's name down so you are committed to this person. This is going to be your accountability buddy. They don't need to know that, or you can share it. And here's what you're going to do within 1 week. You're going to identify what is that big goal? What is that ambitious but attainable vision you have set for yourself? And then I want you within this next week to take one new action step towards it. Now, when I say new, I mean, it's not something that you were already doing or something you're planning on doing. This is you setting the bar higher and saying, if I want to get here, I've got to be a little bolder. I've got to be a little bigger. I'm going to try something new and different. And then at the end of that week, you're going to share this with your partner. If you want to continue on, absolutely. If you want to just have that conversation, or you can share it early so that you can make it a two-way participation, because now you've got an accountability buddy that you can check in with once or as long as you want to. And I want to open this up quickly for some questions, if there are any questions here, and also to let you know, and we'll put this in the chat, that I've got a handout. It is called the True Hope Toolkit for you. It's got that assessment that I mentioned, the 12 questions, so you can see how hopeful you are about your own future. And it's also got this 4-step True Hope process for you. And there are a couple ways you can get it. If you are a texter, you text, just use your phone and text 44222, 44222, and put in the word Hope Kit. One word. Your autofill will try and make it Home Kit or something crazy, and it'll put a space in there, but it's Hope Kit. Or you can just email me at libbygill.com. Super easy, my name at libbygill.com, and put hope in the subject line, and I will send it to you, because that is your reminder to set the bar and go after it. And now I just want to share this one final quote with you, and it is from who I consider a hero of hope, Helen Keller, who said, "Hope sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible." So go out and achieve the impossible. Thank you all.
That was amazing. I can't tell you how inspirational I found that. Thank you so much, Libby, for sharing that with us. It was fabulous. I'm looking at all these women nod their heads and go, yeah, that was really an amazing, especially right now during everything that's going on. Does anybody have any questions for Libby or questions for me or Linda or anybody?
And by the way, I'm always happy to chat with She Can members. Anybody wants to shoot me an email and say, can we hop on the phone? I've already heard from a couple of you, which is really exciting. You are more than welcome to, but I hope you'll download that Hope Kit, just as a reminder to keep setting the bar, and you've got Peggy and the whole She Can team to help you do that.